When love comes the second time, it usually comes with history, and that history often makes the financial side more complicated, not less. Welcome to Betty's Smart Friends, where we explore the full picture of what true success really looks like, from money and relationships to personal growth and well-being. I'm Betty Wang, a certified financial planner. I help women navigate big life transitions and make confident decisions about their money. Today, we're going to talk about the financial and tax planning challenges of second marriages, from blending families and protecting children to balancing love and long-term legacy. I'm so thrilled to welcome DeDe Smolen, formerly Jones, of Innovative Financial. DeDe's been both a mentor and dear friend to me for almost 10 years now. Beyond her credentials as a CPA and a CFP, DeDe brings more than 20 years of experience helping families navigate complex financial, tax, and estate planning decisions with clarity and intention, especially when life doesn't follow a traditional script. DeDe has also taken this transition personally as she got remarried in 2020. So this conversation is about asking better questions, making intentional decisions, and creating financial plans that support strong relationships and long-term peace of mind. Please welcome DeDe to the podcast. Yay.
Thank you. What a
You're
lovely
welcome.
intro. Gosh, it's over 10 years since we've known each other. It's been a treat.
Yes, it's been a while.
Yeah,
Well, tell our listeners a little bit about your background
sure.
and how your experience as a CPA and a CFP shapes how you approach second marriages or
Uh,
planning for them.
and I would simply say, I don't even limit it to second marriages. Anytime two fully formed adults are trying to combine finances with or without the benefit of marriage, there's a lot of questions to consider. There's times when we don't want people to get married for tax reasons, sometimes for liability reasons. So really, it's the concept of how do you best plan that joining with or without marriage, really integrated or keeping it fairly separate. And the finance aspects are huge. The tax aspects are huge as well. And then you protect all of that with appropriate estate planning.
And why do you think? I mean, yes, there's always, when we're combining two families, two people from totally different money stories and
Right.
backgrounds, um, those are complicated. What
Yeah.
do you see when it comes to second marriages? Why is it slightly more
Well,
complicated, or what kind of complexity do you see there?
sure. Well, one word, it's baggage, because we all come with our experiences in the past. If you are divorced and, money was an issue in the first marriage, likely that baggage is coming with you, that kind of thing, or whatever helped you write your money script. It's really key to acknowledge that everybody has their own money story and then look forward together rather than, we don't want to be combative. We both want to look forward at the same time. And so helping couples talk about why it's important that they have the combination. And that then can help clarify the choices that they make. How combined do they need to be? Is it a little bit? Is it a lot? I've seen everything from we keep things totally separate to we do it like grandma and grandpa and absolutely everything is joint. There's no right or wrong answer. It's what serves your why.
Well, I think that's where people, I mean, you've seen it too in financial planning, and they think that there's a right answer because they have, pundits or financial news telling them if they don't do this,
Yeah.
they're screwed, right?
Yeah. Look,
And that's just not the case. It's
no.
such a continuum, and that's where a financial planner or a professional comes in
Right.
to help you find where you are on that continuum.
Right. And facilitate the conversations of the pros and cons of those different places on the spectrum. If it's completely separate, what's good about that and what's not so good about it? Or if it's completely joint, what are the risks that you have? And some families, the risks are going to be different in every situation. So with all the couples I've worked with over the years, there haven't been any two couples that had the exact same arrangement. They've looked at the different pieces carefully, individually, and made very thoughtful choices based on their situation. So it's just a piece by piece A lot of it, though, is so helpful in second marriages. Growing up, none of us are trained on how to talk about money. And if in your first marriage or singledom or whatever it might be, you don't learn those skills, that second marriage, because of the extra baggage, the potential for children, whatever else is going on, learning how to discuss money with your partner is so much more important because there's more moving parts. And so this is building that foundation for that growth, for that success.
Well, and sometimes there's just more wealth too with second marriages.
I was trying not to be crass, but it's later in life. There's more to deal with. Absolutely.
I'll be crass. It's fine.
No.
People are used to it.
No.
What are common pitfalls or blind spots that you see? What are common, I mean, I know everybody's different, but I'm sure, what we hear about is we want to protect, each of our children from our previous marriages, or there's, maybe a family home that's been in their family for generations. They want to keep it bloodline only, things like that. What have you seen, or what kind of blind spots?
The number one mistake is not committing to full transparency. Put all the cards on the table. Let's not have things just sit out and be ignored. Oh yeah, we've got some company stock, but understand, make sure everybody knows what that company stock is. The man I married, his wife's family has a company, and so there's ownership in this company that he has now inherited. And so we spent time learning about what the company is, how it works, and how he fits into it, because he's got, a third share of that generation because of his deceased wife. So understand that stuff, that full transparency piece. And then beyond that, it gets very complicated when there's children. So if you've got kids who haven't gone through college, but you're marrying somebody whose kids are already done, there's going to be some conflict about paying for that college, because this person says, we're already done, and this person goes, I'm not there yet. How do we balance that out? And there's different ways to do it. Does it come out of the joint bucket, or do we set aside an amount so that it's predictable? Or, and it probably you're negotiating with an ex-spouse on that too. So it can be a three-way negotiation of how to make that work. But it's really underlying everything is talking with the important people, the participants. Could be a conversation with the child. I got divorced. The filing was the day after my kids graduated high school, which tells you a little bit something about my ex. But at that point, I sat them down. I said, here's what the resources are. Here's what we can do. And here's what your choices are. I knew what I could get from the ex. I knew what I had. And they went, okay, we'll take that path. And it worked out. It might not have been, the Ivy League education, although neither of them were really set on that. But it set expectations. And really, that helps so much when people can know what to expect. They can act on that information. And it just really keeps the calm.
With your clients or people you work with, how do you recommend approaching that conversation? And I mean, most people don't, they think about the love first, right? They think about, we're going to get married, and then maybe the money and the assets are a secondary piece of it.
It very much is, because we want to follow our hearts. And I want to honor that too. That's the human experience. But if we can keep the finances behaving in a good way, not introducing stress or conflict, it supports your heart. And so that's my goal. I would say globally, sooner rather than later. Let's start talking about it. Like when I was dating my husband, we were really quiet about finances for a good long time, a year or two. And then finally one day he shared his balance sheet, I shared mine, because neither of us wanted to be the purse, right? You want to make sure that there's some parity. Now, that's not necessarily required, but those were values that we held, is we wanted a partnership in the truest sense. And so,
I mean, I would love if we could, for dating sites, if they could do a credit report for my clients.
I can see that happening in the future. That'd be, yeah. I don't need to know how much you make, but I want to make sure you're not
No,
a
I want to
deadbeat.
make sure you pay your bills and you don't owe
Just pay your bill, right?
like,
Yeah. And I might want to know if you have school loans, because that could impact whether I want to marry you, because a lot of school loans, once you get married, you then become a co-borrower. So just something to consider. So
gosh, even if they weren't together during
even
when
if,
your partner,
yeah,
wow,
yeah, not
that's
all
a
loans
helpful
have
tip.
that. So you have to look at the loan to see, but that can be a condition of the loans. And so I have met with folks and they went, yep, we're going to hold off on getting married until that school loan debt is done. Like that's interesting. That tells me there was more going on in that relationship, but it's eyes wide open. When you get married, it's for better or for worse. Well, it's for the richer, for poorer, for whatever debts you are bringing in, for whatever, and all the fun family stuff too. So it's you're joining up with all sorts of variables.
Well, I mean, the reality is that the majority of divorce, or a big factor of it, is people clash over money. It's what
Right?
couples fight over the most.
Well,
So we want to get clear on that.
and I think a lot of money fights are cover for fights where over something deeper. So values that actually aren't shared. And so money's easy because you can quantify it, but really the conflict is even deeper than that, which makes us helping with the money that much more important, because that's going to be representative of whatever baggage people are bringing in. So having those deep conversations with clients can really, really help their marriages be more successful if done well.
What have you seen in your experience? What are red flags if somebody hears their partner say, I don't, this is all I have? Like, how do you trust that? Like, how do you know they're being transparent?
Ooh,
Have you had any experiences where you're like,
I
oh,
haven't had a lot of experiences for lack of transparency
yeah,
in, pardon me, in the straight up hiding of assets, but I have seen situations where
okay,
people go, yeah, it's over there,
yeah,
and just poo poo it. Like, we don't need to include that. Or it can even be, family trusts that have assets but have restrictions on them, or even potential inheritances. And so they just, for whatever their family dynamic is, that's not a comfortable topic for them to discuss. And so we try and bring it up at a level that's comfortable, so it slowly get everybody on the same page. It might not be an asset anybody can do anything about, but awareness is super helpful.
what do you say to clients who say, we just want to split everything fairly? What?
Well, if anybody who's parent to more than one child is familiar with the difference between equal and equitable, right? And that's the same thing in a marriage. If you've got people coming in with wealth and no wealth coming in together, they know this. I mean, hopefully. This is where a prenup can be absolutely fantastic. So a prenup is not divorce planning. It is really good financial planning. In fact, it can actually solidify the strength of a marriage because you've taken the time to lay out what your expectations are. Nobody is doing, behind the scenes deals. You know exactly what's going on for everybody. What are the assets? What are the expectations? What are the liabilities? So really, it's all conversational, getting it to where everybody knows what's out there and what to do about it.
So ideally, let's say two people are considering marriage, second marriage. Should they be contacting their financial advisor first, or an attorney first, or um,
Well, I'm biased. I think working with a financial advisor first can be super helpful if it in a complicated situation. I'm not saying for everybody. Maybe somebody owns a business, somebody else has a family trust, and there's moving parts that are complicated. Working with a financial advisor, you can get a better understanding of the value of them. Sometimes things are hard to value, how they might cash flow, how it might impact taxes, etc., that you can then take to an attorney and create a prenup. And by the way, if you do a prenup, each party needs their own attorney to be properly represented. That doesn't always happen, but that's ideal. And then subsequently, as you do estate planning, you have a great foundation of the elements of the household wealth. So planners first.
Always.
I know, I know, but I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen prenups where financial advisors weren't considered,
Yes.
and they aren't as elegant as I would like to see. They can sometimes make things hard. Um, yeah,
Can
we're
you
still
give an example of that without?
yeah. So there was a prenup that said this account, no, this holding in this account is for my kids as we get married, and it tied this person's IRA into a Wellington mutual fund to the point that because of how it was written, we couldn't rebalance.
Hmm.
And so we got written permission from everybody that we could then go in and rebalance. But it was an interesting way to write it. I would never have said you have to have this particular holding. I would say, X percent of this account or the whole account, or divvy it up and make it its own account separately. So that's one thing I saw that was glaring from a financial planning standpoint.
And for our listeners who aren't in the industry, could you explain to them what rebalancing is and why it's
So
important?
basically what this agreement said was you have to own ABC stock. So the ABC stock is what is going to go to my kids. And as time went on, the portfolio for this family had too much of whatever flavor ABC stock was, and we needed to reduce that holding and move it into, maybe bonds or something to balance things out. But because of the prenup, we were precluded from doing that without involving an attorney. And so eventually they've removed that from the prenup that was agreed with everybody and it was all okay. But rebalancing means we want to make sure that your investments are set up in a way that's consistent with your risk tolerance and risk goals. And that was making it to where we couldn't do that.
Your hands were tied. Yep.
Yep, well put.
You brought up the tax planning piece of it.
Yeah.
What are couples most surprised about with the tax planning
Well,
when combining assets and retirement accounts, especially retirement accounts in second marriages, right? Like arguably would be larger than people who are going into it earlier.
So the tax code has numerous features that change depending on if you're single or married. Some exclusions are more
Especially
favorable.
last 10 years, yeah.
I've been a CPA for longer than I'm going to admit to on camera. And starting in 1986, it's just been bonkers of changes, constant changes. The one thing we know is that change is constant. So, but in the tax code, they try and make it so there's not a marriage benefit or a marriage penalty. They try and make it marriage neutral, but they screw it up every time. Always.
Yes.
Yeah. And so there are some elements in families that get better treatment if you are single. And sometimes there are elements that get better treatment if you're married. And so it's really great if you're working with a financial advisor, a CPA at that point, to say, all right, here's what our tax returns are. What if we combine? And, so getting married is one outcome. Getting married and filing separate is a different outcome. So we can look at all three scenarios. Generally, married filing separate does no favors to anybody. Very, very rarely used. Most of the time we see benefits when couples get married, but not always. So you could have folks who are over 65 and on Medicare, and if they have the disparity in earning, this person is not paying an IRMA surcharge, but this one is. They get married, and now they're both paying the IRMA surcharge. And for those of you who don't know IRMA surcharge,
Thank you.
that is that extra special tax they levy on folks in retirement whose income is higher than certain thresholds to pay toward their Medicare. It's basically a ways to make Medicare means tested.
Yes, I think a lot of folks who aren't in the financial world, they get surprised by the IRMA tax.
Oh, yes. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, we're
So it's
talking about it a
important
lot
to
more.
know that.
So that same disparity after age 65, you might have heard of the widow's penalty that, when you're in your older years, you've got two people and then one of them passes and all of a sudden that survivor is paying a lot more tax. When you get married, the widow's penalty can go away. So it goes both directions. It really depends on where the starting point is for the family. So we watch out for the IRMA. We watch out for the widow and widower's penalty. It's, by the way, not a penalty so much as you've just gone from married filing joint to single. And if your income doesn't change much, that pushes you higher in the tax brackets. So,
yes. And what other changes do you see? You know, there's Social Security, there's RMDs. You kind of alluded to the RMDs with the widow's tax.
yeah. Well,
or even planning for step-ups, right? In case somebody passes.
Right. Yeah. So step-ups are like way in the future. You know,
Yes.
what does that estate planning look like? But even prior to retirement, the things we watch for are beneficiaries on accounts and making sure you get your wills updated, right? And probably looking at a trust if you have any complexity in your world at all, making sure that those assets pass the way you intend, which points right back at how do you take care of the children, the children from previous relationships. That is probably the thorniest topic for couples is, well, I only have one kid and you have two. Why should we split things a third, a third, a third? Why? Indeed. It depends.
Right.
What is the parent of the single child, what's their relationship with the other children? If it's all been one big happy family, maybe that feels okay. If they married later enough in life that the relationships are really more as adults, not really as raising children, etc., a case could be made for half, a quarter, depending on how the assets are, you know, or if this person with the multiple children had the bigger wealth, then you can adjust those percentages again. But you know, what are the assets? Who brought what into the marriage? Who are the potential heirs? You can slice and dice that any way you decide, but you have to sit down and talk about it.
And I think just for the listeners' benefit, not everybody realizes that beneficiary designations supersede their will.
Right.
So that's why it's always really important to make sure that those are updated the way you want, because it's happened, we've seen it in the news where somebody passes and they still have their ex-wife or ex-husband as their beneficiary, and that's really hard to claw back.
And those beneficiaries happen in life insurance, they happen in annuities, they happen in retirement accounts. Those are the big three that we look at. And we can, in Colorado here, we can do beneficiary deeds on homes. So that one, that's not a big three, but it's one to consider as well. So if you've been single a while and you designated your kids as beneficiary on the home, that might need to change. You might need to add the spouse, add additional people as beneficiaries, etc.
Can you talk a little bit about how Social Security works when you have gotten remarried? Because it is, especially if you had a longer first marriage too.
Yeah, so the first rule that comes to mind is if you've been married for 10 years or longer, come time to file for Social Security, you are eligible for the larger benefit of your own earned benefits or that of your ex-spouse if you haven't remarried. So that's rule number one. If you're a widow, you can apply as early as age 60 for benefits if you haven't remarried. So those are two things that impact marriage. In fact, I've dealt with folks in that age range and said, you know, if you wait a year, you can get this other benefit, even though you get remarried. So there's some remarriage dates to be sensitive to. But once you remarry, then your benefits are just like any married folks. Whoever had, you get your own insurance, and if it's less than half of your spouse's, they bump it up to be half of the spouse. Male or female, it's indifferent there.
So your ex-spouse is you can no longer take from them once you're married. After
if you get remarried prior to those cutoff dates, then that option disappears.
And what tools, you talked a little bit about trusts, and I know you're not an estate planner, or you're not an attorney, but you know enough. just generally speaking, where have you seen it used that's been useful?
Well, at the end of the day, all of those documents are communication documents. Here's what I want to happen. So where might the communication go sideways? So the prenups, if you've got some complexities or you just want to make sure everybody's protected, that's where the prenups are super handy. Far fewer people use prenups than would benefit from them. In other words, there's a whole lot of people who, if they did that, they would be very, very well served. And then trusts or wills. Now, each person's situation, depending on where they live and what their assets are, different choices. But having those set up is the gift to the next generation. Now, we don't like hearing about stories where kids get disinherited, but that's where that can happen. So keeping that line of communication open with the next generation is very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it.
I have.
It's bad.
Sometimes very deliberate and sometimes accidental.
Yep.
And I've also seen the opposite, where people got remarried and made verbal commitments to the new spouse to at least leave them something, but never got around to changing beneficiaries. And so the new spouse got left high and dry. So it isn't one way. It can backfire in any number of directions.
What about postnups? Have you seen more use of that?
I've only seen one or two, actually.
Yeah.
Very, very, very little. So there's some, what I don't know if it's argument, whether or not they're enforceable. It's more questionable in terms of enforceability versus a prenup, where it's happened before the event and everybody had representation. The postnups, sometimes you're closing the barn door after the horse got out. Does it really do anything?
Yeah. And then we talked a little bit about the family dynamics and communications. Like how do you recommend sort of tiptoeing your way into these conversations? I mean, I'm kind of a blunt instrument, but I'm sure that there are some folks that are much smoother, or maybe you have questions that you generally ask to kind of open the door a little bit.
Yeah.
Or if someone wants to start that conversation themselves, but they're nervous to start it, I mean, it's how do you have certain questions that are a good way to lead to these discussions?
I think one of the phrases I've used in the past is helping people think about what's the for us money and what's the for our children money.
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's non-judgmental, and when who doesn't want to support the children, right? And so it helps diffuse, as opposed to your money grubbing or something, heaven forbid. It says, all right, how do we take care of us? How do we take care of the next generation? And that's where I've started, and it's worked out quite nice. One of the biggest things that I run into when talking with families about their children is their philosophy around funding college. And it too has that huge gradation. We're going to pay nothing. We're going to pay everything all the way through if they want to be an MD, and something in between. Helping families communicate with the spouses what their philosophy is, and then coaching them how to communicate with the kids, starting earlier than you think, setting expectations of what will be expected from the future college students. So that's a big piece, is really understanding what is the college funding philosophy. Could write a book on that one, I'm sure.
Well, Ron Lieber, is it Lieber? Yeah, Ron Lieber from the New York Times wrote a book about how to pay for college that I thought was really good.
How to pay is cool, but really what your family philosophy is that next level.
Well, he goes through that's part of that. That's even before you start thinking about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, good. Because that's
especially coming from different, two different parents, coming from different backgrounds. And then when you have, say 2 remarriages, basically 4 people in this conversation, that can get complicated.
Right. Yeah. So that's the big one. And that's a conversation I have with every couple, but it's more complicated when it's, blended families.
What about legacy planning? I mean, I could see how college planning is
that's one step.
A hard topic, but legacy planning is also, you had alluded to it as well.
Yeah.
for us and for our kids.
Well, the first gift is to make sure you leave enough money for yourselves so you don't become a burden to your children, right?
Yes, amen.
Right. So seriously,
Yeah, no, we all
don't
want
give
to,
away.
yeah.
I have a client who did that, who was so generous with her children, she impoverished herself and is now dependent on the charity of her kids. That family, it's worked out for. They're all happy. I'm happy for her. But from a nuts and bolts spreadsheet answer, it was disconcerting to watch. Not normal. Most folks have a self-preservation instinct.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know. So that one
That
was
that
kind of
that
good.
would make me very nervous. Yes.
Yeah, that one,
I'm glad that worked out for her.
yes, yeah, exactly. That's what I have to hang my hat on, is it did work out for her. That strategy worked. But yeah, the legacy question is complicated, especially. So imagine one of those children is special needs. Then you just 10 times the complexity. How do you take care of these kids? Maybe you have one child who's very, success driven, took out big school loans. The other one's perhaps more artistic and very comfortable with a lower standard of living. How do you make the estate equal for them? Somebody goes, I need help with my loans. The other one's like, kind of whatever, but, please don't cut me out. What do you do so that on your passing, there are not people cursing you? So again, it's a conversation, and oftentimes including those beneficiaries in the conversation can help you achieve clarity. Because it could be the one kid goes, I really don't care if it's 75-25 or whatever. That's totally groovy with me. And then you can make that decision confidently and with clarity. So special needs kids, that's when, the attorneys that we know out there need to step in, set up the appropriate trusts so that they're taken care of. Because much like we want to make sure that we keep our money and we take care of ourselves and don't become a burden, we want to make sure that that special needs sibling is taken care of and doesn't become a familial burden to the siblings or nieces and nephews.
And then what have you seen that's worked when it comes to, long-term, when it comes to aging and long-term care and those sorts of conversations? That's not legacy per se, but it is an important piece of our clients' lives.
It's an undeniable piece. We can't avoid it. There's, the odds are most of us will be in an assisted living facility for some period of our life. Most of us hope that it isn't a very long period of our lives, right? So with that said, if people are young enough, we want to look at hedging that and buying insurance. And if you're getting married, there are policies out there that can be purchased for two people. So it's a bundle of insurance that goes across two people. That can be more affordable. I'm not a specialist in insurance, so that's as much as I will say there, but it's definitely something worth looking into prior to age 60. After age 60, the insurance options are very expensive.
Yeah.
And frankly, when I talk about that kind of insurance, I call it a portfolio protection, because what you're doing is protecting that portfolio for the person who isn't in care and, preserving those assets for them. And so the planning is, again, how do we take care of these people so that they don't become a burden on their children? And that can impact perhaps their spending plan, making sure that they don't spend so much that should the day come they need care, there aren't enough resources. It could be just philosophically thinking about it. It could be as simple as moving to a different house that's more age and place appropriate. So this is probably one of my soapbox topics, but think about your future self. Are you going to be comfortable carrying the laundry up and down the stairs? Is it going to be okay to scrape the car off in the winter? What kinds of things when you're the 75 or 85-year-old self might be difficult or might even be dangerous? Make those changes. So that would be my advice, unrelated to combining families. Anybody, think about making your living space as age-friendly as possible.
in general, what have you seen with, your client base or personally work? Maybe best is probably not the right word, but where have you seen the most success when combining? I mean, of course, there's the honesty, but is in second marriages, you see that it's better or it's more successful if each partner keeps their own assets and pays into one bucket? I mean, that's much more common now with younger
Yeah, it
couples as
is.
well.
I think everybody needs access to money that they can spend without supervision, right?
Yes,
Because we're
fun money.
grown-up
Yes,
adults, right?
completely.
And so negotiating an allowance, which is a horrible, but just saying, look, this is how much I'm going to, we will slide this much into your bucket, this much into your bucket, the rest of it we keep combined as a family resource. And then get clarity on who pays for what. Does going out to dinner come from his, hers, or ours? Yours, mine, or ours too. Yeah. So conversations around that makes a lot of sense. Our parents had fully joint stuff, so that wasn't an issue. But you lose autonomy when you don't give people some spending money that is unsupervised. I think that's important that people have access to that. The bigger thing that I think leads to success is awareness. So you can give money your energy or you can give money your attention. And giving it your energy sort of is like, spinning and not getting anywhere. But giving it attention means you can be deliberate about it, acknowledge it, and move on. And the tools over the years, something like mint.com, we have an app through eMoney that people can do that with. You can use Monarch Money. There's a lot of tools, but linking all of your finances into a single place that has everything, full disclosure, and you can see what's going on. You can look. If you're somebody who needs to look more often, you can. If you're somebody who's happy to ignore it, you can do that too. But knowing that it's there has been one of the most successful moves I've seen in second marriages, is just so they know.
Yeah.
It isn't tactical. It isn't a huge planning. It's just, oh, that's it. Oh, good. I can relax and move on. So having a place where everybody can see the full picture at any time. That's the key, I think.
What about when you have a big disparity in financial wealth coming into the second marriage?
Yes.
I mean, I guess, what are your recommendations for the person coming in with less wealth versus, I mean, I know we're working as a team, but what
Yeah.
what are you advising on both of them, right? Because our job is to give them the pros and cons of different things. Like, what are you talking to them about?
Right. Well, it isn't just an income disparity, but it's a power disparity too, because in our culture, money is power. So I think, premarital counseling in that situation wouldn't be amiss. Or sometimes you can have one partner that's retired and the other one's still working. And so that can be interesting. Passive incomes, who has a pension, who doesn't, deferred comp, that kind of thing. And a lot of times the person who earns more money unintentionally dominates the money conversation. They don't mean to. They're just, they have more money, so they shift things. And so that brings us back to that equal versus equitable topic. Equal would mean you would have one person who, lives like a little church mouse, and that probably isn't the intention of anybody. And when the partner has largesse, if you will. And negotiating, that's where having here's a bucket to spend, unsupervised can really help. Now, they don't have to be the same amount. It kind of depends, what's your hobby. If your hobby is needlepoint, that's a whole lot different than if your hobby is, refurbing Rolls Royces or something. They could be different, but you can adjust it to the interests and the equitability in the partnership. But it's important, defining that discretionary spending autonomy for each partner is the key. So don't use math as an equation for emotions. So what are the emotions? What's important? What's going to feel right? And then set up a system that supports that feeling.
What about clients who are maybe 7 years, 7 years away from retirement, um, or 5 to 10 years, right? Where they're still accumulating.
Yeah.
Um, how do you go about that conversation, right? Um, do you still approach it the same way? What if one partner has a lot saved for retirement and the other one doesn't? Those are awkward and hard conversations to have. How do you approach that?
Well, it starts with finding out, you know, how is it you got here? You know, there's a big difference. Oh, well, she had stock options that exploded. That's what happened there. Pretty much we're the same has happened. Sometimes it's like, well, because my job had better match, I saved a lot more, and so we spent less out of the other person's paycheck. Can be equal, or sometimes it's just like I didn't feel like it. That's where it gets difficult when you have somebody who is indifferent about participating in the marriage. In which case, that's a marriage counselor situation, not so much a planning situation. But at the tail end of things, we want to make sure that the unit is going to be successful. Again, it's always the hardest time is anytime we have disparate levels of wealth, right, coming in, be it cash flow, be it resources. Helping people negotiate that is far more difficult than when there's equality. Alternatively, I have some very, very old clients where the wife was stay at home the entire time and you just have a single decision maker. Interestingly, those folks are really good with 50-50 because there was never any power. The power imbalance was set, forget, and they're like, yep, 50-50, this is where we are. So it's that gray area in between. And I think, we as a culture, we're still working through how to make that work. And then it boils down to individual cases of how do we help everybody feel validated in the relationship? How do we manage the money in such a way that it helps that family be successful over time?
Can you talk about a success story that you've worked with? I'm sure there's a lot of them,
Well,
but
for the one where we had the restrictive prenup, this couple, they got married in their mid 60s. They're my poster children, and they had very different levels of wealth. Hers was not shabby, but his was like, okay, very much. And he wanted to protect his kids. And so they created that prenup. And let's see, we are 10 years into working with them. And at this point, they sound much more like the very elderly couple that I spoke to you with. At this point, it feels like very good 50-50. All of their children get along much better. They've updated the prenup. They've updated their trusts to recognize the more cohesiveness of their family. And so that's really cool that as time went on, the differences between them just merged and they've melded nicely.
it's
Yep.
nice.
It is. Yeah. I wish I had more to do with it. It's just, they are absolutely fantastic people. They've done a great job.
So if somebody listening today is considering second marriage, what
Yep.
what do you think their top two steps that they should take right now?
Well, first is transparency. Just make sure that you each know all the stuff about the other. And some of that's financial, some of it's maybe family history, or family dynamics, understanding what you're getting into. Nothing is don't do it, but just know what it is. That's really, really the number one and number two thing in my world. What am I missing? What would you do differently, Betty? What would you ask?
I think it is just starting with what you said, right? It's
Yeah.
we need to know where each of you are at, where you want to go, and how they see it happening, and
Yeah.
what the pros and cons of that is, and again, trying to find where they are on the continuum, and just
Yeah.
for that, it's facilitating the conversation because they get to that
Yeah.
themselves, I feel like, and having a non-judgmental space
A safe
that is open
space.
for
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
right? Where I think we've talked about this before, where talking about money is normalized, right? It's not this, um, I have this, you have that,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's more, okay, these are the facts. let's talk about what makes sense.
Yeah.
But I really like the way you put it, as the what's for us, what's for our kids,
Yeah.
what are kind of hot points for us, right?
Yeah.
Like we all, as we hopefully age and become more self-aware, we know that there's certain hot buttons for us, especially when it comes to money.
Right.
I think we're getting better at that. And so that might be a place to start because you might be able to avoid some fights from
Yeah.
that.
I like to invite future thinking too. Imagine you could see into the future. What will cash moving through your family look like a year, 2 or 3 years from now? Who's going to manage the money? Who's going to pay the bills? How would it flow through that would make it easiest slash best or slash most convenient for the two of you? And sometimes starting there and working backwards is much easier than starting in the here and now, because the here and now feels permanent, and it isn't. And so if we can think about how it could possibly be, it can make it a lot easier to get there.
No, I think that makes sense because I mean, sometimes when you have two people who are been on their own for a while, they're the money lead, and now it's who becomes the money lead,
Right.
or how do you share those responsibilities while keeping each other informed? So it's
Right.
talking through that.
Yeah. Back in the dark ages, I know this is going to date me seriously. I would suggest that one partner pay the bills and the other partner reconcile the bank account. That tells you how old I am. But what it did was, depending on the skill set, who was better at one thing or the other, both people would see what was happening. We can't do that anymore. That's where having the app helps. You can just kind of see what's going on. So, no obligation. That's the beauty of the app, is no one's going to make you do it, And most of our bills we can set up to auto pay these days, so that can kind of happen. So that's where we shift into awareness. Be aware, kind of watch, understand what it means. My goal with clients is to give them a yardstick so that they can measure the impact of whatever change they have made or change that they're considering. And that's what all of this is about. What impact does getting married have on their taxes? Filing jointly versus separately versus, staying single. What does that yardstick look like for you in that situation? So all about the yardstick.
I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but what's one thing that you wish every couple understood about whether it's financial, tax related, estate planning before they enter a second marriage?
Oh, the one thing, that your willingness to be transparent is directly correlated with the likelihood of success in your marriage.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably across the board, right?
Yes, it is.
Emotionally
Yep.
transparent
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
right.
The more you can be present emotionally, financially, even spiritually, the better that relationship is going to be. And that's what we want for our clients.
It's true.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't covered regarding second marriages that you want to make sure that listeners know, or that I haven't asked you about?
Oh, you've done a really good job of covering things from hither to yon. Don't be shy about the conversations. Understand that everybody comes with whatever baggage that they have. Be gentle. You've got baggage too. You want your partner to be gentle with you too.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially for women, right? Be gentle.
Yes.
We're,
Gentle on your partner, be gentle on yourself. Both directions.
Yes.
Good.
Well, so what my closing questions are, most of my guests, and like you as well, like your work is very emotionally charged at times. How do you personally stay grounded and maintain balance for yourself?
I'm not sure that I do, but I try.
I get that answer a lot too.
Yeah, no, it's difficult. Part of being good at what you do is being invested in it. And being invested means you can't always completely step away. at the same time, you need to be wife and parent and friend and family. So, see that door? As I walk through that door, I try and leave what's here, and let the regular me be me. But there's no magic thing. I think that then comes down to the wellness stuff. Eat right, exercise, take your vitamins.
Well, we've definitely had folks on here to talk about wealth, or not wealth, but health stuff and well-being,
Well, that
and
too,
vitamins in particular. Yeah.
I should go,
There's lots of things we can be doing.
consult with them.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I do work out with a
yeah.
trainer twice a week. That helps. So,
Yeah. Well, and that's my next question. What do you enjoy doing? And where can listeners find you if they want to connect with you or learn more about what you and your firm do?
well, our website, innovativefinancial.com. Love to chat with you there. We can chat anytime. There's a click on a chat with me button there. I've got a library of videos on YouTube under DeDe Talks Money, and videos upcoming on Instagram and maybe even TikTok. I don't know if they, yeah, exactly. I feel so groovy
So
to be
hip.
on TikTok. I know. And that's the biggies. That's where I kind of hang out. I like video format. So if you find writing by me, you've found something very unusual. It exists. It's not common.
What do you like to do on your free time?
Free time.
What are
Well,
your,
what you
yeah.
can't see right now, it's two little furry puppies keep me company. So they're the joy of my life. I have a 7-month-old grandbaby that's keeping me busy as well. That's absolutely fantastic and fun. Obviously, I still feel like a newlywed. It's been 6 years and I still feel like a newlywed. So yay for that.
That is nice.
We like to go off-roading, do some hiking, and, just enjoy each other's company. We do lots of cooking together. That part's fun too. Well, those are kind of it.
Well, that sounds like a very full life.
It is. I can never schedule myself with the best of them.
Well, DeDe, thank you so much for a great conversation. I knew it would be. I knew you'd have a lot of good advice for our listeners and things to think about, and not even for folks who are looking for a second marriage, but just how to do life a little bit better. Right?
That's for everyone.
So today we talked about, the financial and tax challenges of a second marriage, that it's not always easy to talk about, but really these topics are too important to ignore. And as DeDe said, transparency is really the name of the game here. Today highlights that smart planning in a second marriage isn't about choosing one person, one bucket over another. It's about creating clarity, a safe space, reducing friction, and making intentional choices. So if this episode resonated, please subscribe to Betty's Smart Friends or share it with someone who might need it. And check the show notes if you would like help thinking through your own planning, or if you'd like to connect with DeDe, we'll put some of the resources in there. Until next time, be well, everyone.